as the country is going into a new era itself, and with the new policies coming up, we do believe that there's a renewed interest in the sector.
Right.
There's a renewed scientific thought processes that are coming across.
Thank you so much for staying with us on Tea Time, and welcome back. We're still discussing agriculture, agri-financing, warehousing with the CEO, of course, of SLCM. Now, Sandeep, where we really left off was, what percentage of agriculture today contributes to the overall gross domestic produce of the nation? I believe the percentage is only declining.
Correct. So you have to understand this from real-time values. See, our percentage has come down to about 16.5 to 17% of GDP. It does not mean that agriculture is not growing. It only means that the other sectors and other services are growing at a much faster and a more aggressive pace.
Compared to ag.
Compared to ag. But having said that, what do we feel is that as the country is going into a new era itself, and with the new policies coming up, we do believe that there's a renewed interest in the sector.
Right.
There's a renewed scientific thought processes that are coming across. So one of the major issues here would be that, a welcome step that I saw in this budgetary speech itself was when the finance minister said that I am allocating such an amount of money to scientific storage. For the first time we heard a word called scientific storage.
Really?
And that actually shows a marked movement for people to understand that yes, agriculture is not about infrastructure. It is a lot about scientific processes that go behind those infrastructure.
Let's discuss agri-finance now. How much of that is existing in India right now? Do we need to scale it up to another level? I believe you've also recently forayed into the agri-finance and credit loan facilities as well.
Correct.
At SLCM.
So, see, you have to understand, Chetty, that agri-finance was always available in India. It's not that it wasn't available. But the difference is that, it was basically taken as the domain of the public sector banks or the other banks as such.
It was never privatized.
It was never privatized.
Right.
One is that. Second important thing is that the culture required to do agri-financing has to be a little different from a banking forte.
Correct.
When you say banking forte, what I'm trying to say is that even today, when banks are financing, especially against warehouse receipt financing, they are looking for collateral managers to ensure the quality and the quantity. Now that itself reduces the kind of dependency on their own inwards and their own thought processes and adds to the cost towards finance. Now when you're talking about agriculture, all costs that go towards a final throughput product is detrimental for everybody, for the consumer, for the farmer and so on and so forth.
Because you're passing on the cost increases to the end consumer.
Correct,
right?
correct.
Yeah.
So what we thought and what we saw over a period of time is that if a warehousing collateral manager themselves who have the wherewithal of actually ensuring that the crop is kept properly, they have the ability to assess the value of the crop, it would be logical extension for them to actually start supplying the credit.
Right.
Which we as a company started or commercialized on 1st of April of this year itself.
How important today is warehousing in the overall scheme of things? Is enough being done? Are there enough players in the market who are taking care of warehousing and the supply chain logistics problem which exists in our country, which is one of the biggest problems in commercialization these days? Is that being taken care of? Are we still losing a lot of harvested crops in due to poor supply chain logistics here in India?
So warehousing till now has been taken in from a very different perspective and a very different light. We've been talking about warehousing in the past decade in terms of infrastructure creation.
Correct.
So, whenever you talk about warehousing, and especially 7 years ago when I started this group, is that we used to talk about warehousing management services and people used to laugh at us. They used to say, what is this gentleman talking about? Warehousing means getting some land, putting a structure onto it, and that's about it. But over about the 7 years, the biggest change in perception and the systems that we have seen is that people have started noticing that warehousing management per se is a different segment.
Right.
And having said that, post-harvest agri-logistics is a culmination of a lot of things coming together to perform the task. Warehousing is one part of it. Agri-logistics in terms of movement of trucking and freighting is another part. Then the culmination of the processes to ensure the longevity of the crop during the tenure of the storage is another issue for it. And finally, obviously, the credit facilities. And it becomes very pertinent that India itself has only 2 cropping cycles, the Rabi and the Kharif.
Correct.
Whereas our consumption is pretty much uniquely staggered over the entire year. So automatically what it means is that not only do you require warehousing, but you will require credit behind that.
Right.
And that's what is the entire game, and the segment is all about. Now, having addressed this, I do not think that there are enough players in the segment. Not from a perspective of just the number of players, but also from the understanding of the players. Second important thing is that if you look at the entire players, there are very few organized players. So let's talk about SLCM itself. Our throughput is at about 6 million metric tons in a year. India on dry food grain basis itself produces 250 million metric tons.
Right.
So all of us put together, we are not even scratching the surface. The tip of the iceberg as of yet. So I think there's enough room for a lot of new players to come in. I think there's enough room for all of us to expand even further.
Talking about government administration, are the policies favorable today for warehousing and supply chain logistics in India today?
So we've seen a lot of policies changing and acting towards the betterment of this entire sector, including certain tax ops that have been coming in. But a lot is yet to be done, and we are very hopeful for that with this new government in place, this would be addressed over a period of time.
Right, and you just mentioned right now that there aren't too many players in the market, especially it's not about creating infrastructure, but organically realizing that you need the right kind of talent and the scientific processes to come in. When you started SLCM, was this one area that you tapped as an entrepreneur and said, this is where I can capitalize on, and this is where I believe that the growth potential lies, because obviously there aren't too many players in this space? What was the whole idea behind you? Was it passion?
So it was
tapping business potential?
It's somewhat of identifying the need and then going after the need.
Right.
So
you don't create the need.
Yeah, we don't. We address the need, and that's the whole beauty of the entire segment that we are operating out of. That the need was inherently there, and it was staring at everybody's face. But the difference was that people are not looking or addressing that need. So people used to talk about that I have a warehouse at such particular location and I need to fill it up. But the crop is on a different location. So there are two different things that we're talking about. There's a need for the crop to be stored, which is at a different location, and there is a need for this infrastructure to also be served. What do? We connect that.
Correct.
And that's what we do. We are saying that whether the crop is in X part of the location and the warehouse is in the Y part, we don't require the warehouse. We require the SOP, the process, and to ensure that the process is followed, so that the same stocks can be stored where they are. Whether it's an archaic warehouse, it's an open field, it's a plinth, and yet give you the same kind of processes that you require and you acknowledge from a developed country.
So you've just connected the dots over
Correct.
there. Now what we need to do is connect the dots as far as our game is concerned. Let's play a chip shot and we continue talking. Come.
Sure.
Very good. Lovely. With that, let's take a quick break right here on Tea Time. When we return, we stay in conversation with the promoter and CEO of SLCM and continue our discussion. Take a break. We'll see you on the other side.
Sector that we are serving is so high and so large, and so the universe is so big that any kind of growth that we augment from here would obviously require more and more funding as we go across.
Thank you for staying with us on Tea Time and welcome back. Now, where we really left off was talking about the regional imbalances as well that we are creating. About 1/5 of warehousing is present in the major consumption states in India. There's a lot of regional imbalance that we're noticing. Also, we're noticing that there is about $10 billion worth of grains that are wasted annually as well. How are we as a country addressing this? I mean, I know SLCM is doing a lot, but as a country, what are we doing?
So as a country, we see that the public administration has changed quite a bit of their own thinking and the schemes behind it.
Right.
And that is also evident from the fact that most of the public administration, for example, the state warehousing corporations, are actually outsourcing their entire management to companies like us. So as SLCM itself has done so in certain states, we see that happening more and more and more as we go across. And that is they are acknowledging the gap the gap between what they know and what is supposed to be done on the ground. And I think the awareness for any new change to come, awareness is the first fundamental behind which anything is going to happen. I think we've already achieved, SLCM has achieved that, and so has this country.
SLCM is also growing at a compounded annual growth rate of about 65% thereabouts annually, isn't it? What are you attributing such stellar growth rates to? So, being one of the only few in the business, is that why?
One is that, as I said, that we're not making any demands. We are just catering to a need. And since the need is very large, as I've said, 250 million metric tons is what India produces. So obviously the need is humongous. And having said that, when I said that we have been going at 60% plus on an annual basis every year now for the last 5-7 years, I wouldn't say that I'm assuming, but I actually know that we are going to keep on with this stellar growth for the next good decade or so.
Could you throw some light on what kind of top line and bottom line growth are you clocking in year on year?
So for the year of FY14, we clocked a top line of about 1100 crores, and this year on the same throughput basis we're looking at about 1800 crores.
Oh really? For FY15?
FY15 we're looking at 1800 crores, and our EBITDAs are also growing in the same pace as we speak.
Right.
And our tonnage is also growing across the same pace. So as I've said, we are growing at leaps and bounds, but this is still dwarfed to see from the environment that we are trying to serve.
So it's interesting because when you started off as seed capital of like 17 lakh Indian rupees, and that's about it. And today, look at how you've grown. How's the journey been, and how difficult was it for you to start off with 17 lakh worth of seed capital and today generate a top line of about 1100 crore rupees?
So it was very difficult because what was happening is that when we started with 17 lakhs of seed capital, the first thing that we needed to change was to change ourselves. The first problem is that you start addressing that this can be done, and it's not something which is not doable. Second important thing that I need to attribute this is that also demonstrated over a quarter-to-quarter performance to people that yes, any capital that you put into such a venture will come back with a decent return on capital.
Right.
And that we have been doing over a period of time, and we were glad that we got our first venture capital coming in, and we were the first company in India to get a venture capital in this particular sector.
So the seed capital was through venture capitalists or through an angel investor, and eventually you scaled up with VCs?
So the initial seed capital was put in by me, and then we had our first venture capital coming in the May of 2010.
Right.
And then subsequently we had three more rounds coming in, and now today we are sufficiently capitalized from venture capital as we speak.
Right.
But as I've said, that the sector that we are serving is so high and so large, and so the universe is so big that any kind of growth that we augment from here would obviously require more and more funding as we go across.
On a lighter note, when do you plan to take on this game seriously? You have been playing as an amateur from what I understand.
Yes, I have been playing this as an amateur. I love the sport, but time is a constraint for us.
Right.
For me specifically, being the CEO, that does not mean that we don't have a team. We have a very large team in place, but we are clocking some enormous growth figures.
Yeah.
And we continuously want to do that. So I believe that yes, I'll have to manage it somehow.
There are a lot of rules by which most entrepreneurs do live their lives, and of course if you've been able to create such a wonderful business for yourself, there has to be some level of determination, some level of regimented lifestyle that you must be following off the green as well. Could you throw some light on your lifestyle?
So one big rule that I have is that Sunday is a complete off. It's a complete off for me. In fact, I completely switch off, and I am connected with my family and my son, and I try and devote as much time as I can. And then also the other regimental rule that I brought in is that I've started taking short vacation breaks. Call it power breaks or whatever you'd like to.
You don't take an annual vacation, but shorter ones?
Yeah, so I take a couple of shorter vacations and try and club them with holidays that are already available to us as a company. Though let me also tell you that as a company we're working 365 days, 24 hours. So we don't have a break. It's the nature of the business. So we're not closed for any day as such. But then yes, we have rules and regulations in place to ensure that the continuity goes on, and yes, our personal lives, my personal life, my management team's personal life is not affected to such a degree that it starts affecting their role.
Any other sport that you pursue?
I pursue squash, or I used to be an avid squash player till about 5 years ago. It's just the time constraints have been quite high.
All right, on that note, let's finish our game. Come. Oh, lovely. Lovely. Thank you so much, Sandeep, for being on the show here with me and taking time out. Really appreciate it. On that note, it's a wrap from me, Chaiti Narula, on Tea Time. I'm going to see you next week again, same time, same place. Until then, enjoy the flight of a good drive, and may the sport be with you.